Tonight's talk is a collaboration of three of our program facets: Health and Human Services, National Trends and Services, and Services to Youth. This topic is also a national focus for our organization as well, and we are pleased that our national president, Dr. Kim Jeffries-Leonard, has joined us this evening. We are pleased to have renowned expert, Dr. Louis Baxter, as our featured presenter. Thank you for joining us this evening as we learn about the national epidemic vaping is having on our youth and our communities. I would now like to introduce Mrs. Rhonda Starks Crowder, Eastern Area Program Chair.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Tucker Sims. As mentioned, my name is Rhonda Starks Crowder, and I currently serve as the Eastern Area Program Chair. I have waited with great anticipation to host our first in a series of Green Table Talks. Green Table, Green Table. Green Table is our forum where we come together as a community to discuss emergent topics of concern regarding our Black community. We all benefit from these forums, so we encourage you to reach out to us at ealinkprogram@gmail.com if you have a specific interest that you would like for us to entertain. We'd love to hear from you. We are seated at the Green Table this evening to address the national health crisis surrounding vaping, also known as e-cigarette use. E-cigarette use has been in play for many years, yet there has been an alarming surge in lung-related injuries and even deaths reported among vaping children and young adults. The hazards of vaping is trending nationally, with several states, Michigan, Maine, New York, Rhode Island, and others, banning flavored e-cigarettes or all vaping products in total. Here's what we know. On September 27, 2019, at 1:00 p.m., the Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued the following briefing, quote, CDC, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, state and local health departments, and other clinical and public health partners are investigating a multi-state outbreak of lung injury associated with e-cigarette use or vaping, end quote. They received sex and age data for approximately 770 patients, of which 69% are male. 2/3 or 62% of those patients are between the ages of 18 and 34 years old, with 22% of patients between the ages of 18 and 21, and an alarming 16% of patients are under the age of 16. These are our babies. Vaping and e-cigarette use and abuse is no longer their problem, it is our problem. It is affecting our community. Vaping is claiming the lungs and in some cases the lives of our youth. So it's time to come, assemble around the green table, and let's talk about it. This evening, we present the truth about vaping and its effects on our children. We are fortunate to have Dr. Louis Baxter, our subject matter expert, join us this evening to help sort through the fake news from the real news. First, just a few housekeeping reminders as we get started. Again, all lines have been muted to ensure the quality of this meeting environment. If you have questions or concerns during the session, please use the chat box. Our moderator will monitor the chat box and address all questions throughout the presentation. And we've also allotted time at the end to address questions. This call is being recorded. You can find a copy at www.ealinks.org. Now, without further delay, please allow me to introduce this evening's moderator, Mrs. Siobhan Arline Bradley. Mrs. Arline Bradley earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Exercise Science and a Master of Public Health degree from Tulane University. Her brilliance is complemented by her benevolence. Mrs. Arline Bradley graduated from the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University with a Master of Divinity degree. She is the founding principal of REACH, Beyond Solutions, LLC, which is a public health policy advocacy, faith, and executive leadership firm. She served in the office of the United States Surgeon General in my president's administration, Barack Obama, as the Director of External Engagement and Senior Advisor. Prior to her tenure there, she served as Executive Vice President of Strategic Planning and Partnerships and Health Director for the National NAACP. She is the co-chair of the National Social Action Commission of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and a member of the Columbia, Maryland chapter of Jack and Jill Incorporated. She's an integral part of my team, where she serves as the newly appointed Eastern Area Chair of Health and Human Services Facet. She is my sister and my friend. And this evening, she takes on a different role. She takes her place at our green table as this evening's moderator. Please welcome Mrs. Arline Bradley.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Thank you for the introduction. Good evening to all of our friends who are joining us online. Rhonda, as I'm talking, go ahead and mute your line, and I'm going to go ahead and get this conversation started. We are beyond excited to see these phone lines beginning to blow up. We have people calling in from all over the country. So before I introduce Dr. Baxter, I do want to ask folks in the chat, let us know which city and state you are calling from. We want to get a sense of who is on the line. So just start to type in your messages. And if you have friends that have texted in, tell them to text you their city and state and let us know. We want to get a sense of who's on the line. To our national president, who I understand is on the line, Madam President, thank you so much for joining. We're excited to have you. Madam Area Director, Link Shawana, thank you so much for the opportunity to serve on your team, but to also share this knowledge with our listeners. I see the cities. I see New York. I see Delaware. I see Maryland. I see Connecticut. I see New Orleans, Louisiana, where I went to school. I see Bowie, Maryland. I see Prince George's County. I see Upper Marlboro. Brooklyn is in the house, and I'm a Jersey girl. I see New Jersey's in the house. We've got Hampton, Virginia. We've got folks from Ohio. Oh my goodness, we are all over the map. This is exciting. Bucks County, we see you. Richmond, we see you. Suffolk, we see you. This is an amazing, amazing, amazing site. Dr. Baxter, you've got ears all over the country that are calling in, and we are excited to have you on board. In addition to acknowledging the city and states where we have our listeners calling in, I see you, Arlington. I see you, RV, Rancocas Valley. We also had an opportunity to connect, Link Alexia, I see you, Cleveland, Ohio, with some of our national partners. I want you to know that the Links Incorporated is an organization of institutional connection. This is what we do best. And our friends at Jack and Jill of America were so interested in this conversation. Many of them just came from on the Hill, from being in Washington, D.C. We have a number of moms that we actually heard from today that are going to be joining us tonight. And in addition to our friends at Jack and Jill of America, the Divine Nine received an invitation. So we have members from Alpha Phi Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi. We have Delta Sigma Theta, Phi Beta Sigma, Zeta Phi Beta, Sigma Gamma Rho, and Iota Phi Theta are on the line tonight. These lines are blowing up because this issue is so important. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to begin this conversation. Oh, I see we have our National Project Lead High Expectations on the line. Thank you so much. My own mom joined the line from New Jersey. I see you, Mom. Thanks for joining. And I see folks from Harrisburg. You're all calling in to keep sending those lines in. Dr. Lewis E. Baxter, he is the president and CEO of Professional Assistance Program of New Jersey Incorporated. Dr. Lewis Baxter is no stranger to this issue that we are going to be speaking about tonight. Just indulge me because it is important for me, especially that we have some young people that may be on the line. I would like you to hear the bio of a man that has made major strides in addiction medicine. He received his BS in biology and Bachelor of Arts in American Civilization from the University of Pennsylvania. He received his medical doctorate degree from Temple University School of Medicine. He also did his internship and residency in internal medicine at UMDNJ, that's the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, Cooper Hospital University Medical Center, and he's done a fellowship in addiction medicine at Portsmouth Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. He is not only certified and licensed by a number of medical boards, but he has a number of academic affiliations and some I want to name tonight. He's the founder and program director of Addiction Medicine Fellowship at Howard University School of Medicine and an assistant clinical professor at the Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School currently. He has a number of specialty connections, the American Board of Addiction Medicine, National Association of Drug Court Professionals, also ASAM, which is big in this world, the American Society of Addiction Medicine. He's been a fellow and past president and chairman. For some of the young people that are on the line, would love to hear some of his other affiliations. He is a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine. Also, he is a consultant to the National Football League as well as the National Basketball Association on substance abuse treatment and the U.S. Olympic Anti-Doping Committee. We got Olympics next year coming up. He is currently serving on the committee. So friends, without further ado, I wanted you to hear some of his bio because he's a published medical leader. To those of us that are members of Links Incorporated, he's also a beloved connecting link. He is married to a link, and so we are grateful for his time tonight. So Dr. Baxter, I'm going to turn the line over to you, sir, to go ahead and get us started with your presentation. Please welcome with your e-chat, Dr. Baxter.
So much, and I have to tell you that I feel very, very honored and privileged to be part of this inaugural Green Table. This is a great thing, and I salute all of you Links for the commitment and the energy that you bring to taking care and educating our community. So I take my hats off to you. This is a very important subject. As you all know, it has hit the headlines over the past couple of weeks, and it's really taking this whole country by storm. I'm going to just spend a little bit of time talking about some of our learning objectives. We're going to talk about the prevalence and the epidemic itself. I would like to tell you what we ought to at least basically know about e-cigarettes. We need to understand that there are special solutions that are being used in vaping and in e-cigarettes. And the most important thing for you to hear is that they are not FDA approved. So these are solutions that people are putting together in their own laboratories, in some cases in their own houses, because the black market is in on this as well. We need to learn some of the risk associated with use. I hope to talk about what parents can do to help prevent some of this and what you need to look for. There are some signs of vaping use that I think will be helpful, especially as we're looking to save some of our middle school age and even high school age children. And there's going to be a segment that we're going to talk about how to start the conversation. As we all know, teenagers think they're invincible, and they think that we don't know what we're talking about whatsoever. So it's very important that we start the conversation right. And then we'll talk about what's next, what's out there for us. Now, the prevalence and the epidemic, as it was stated earlier, e-cigarettes have been around since 2007. In fact, I remember having an e-cigar that was given to me to try. I did it. I didn't like it because it didn't taste like the real thing. But they have perfected it, and it does taste even better than the real thing today. It is the most commonly used delivery system of nicotine since 2014. E-cigs and vaping has increased by high school and middle-aged children by 28% in 2018. This topic is so hot that the latest figure is up to 32 to 35% in 2019, and we're not even through. 1 out of 20 in middle school have used e-cigarettes or have vaped. 1 out of 5 in high school have used e-cigarettes or have vaped. It is estimated that approximately 3.6 million youth have at least tried, if not are regular users of vaping and e-cigarettes within the past 2 years. Now, I think that it's important that we need to know some basic things about vaping and e-cigarettes. One is that almost all solutions contain nicotine. And when I say almost all, I don't mean 50%, I don't mean 75, I mean more than 90% of these solutions contain nicotine. As I mentioned to you earlier, a lot of them are unregulated by the FDA. So some of these solutions actually include THC as well. They have kid-friendly flavors that are cherry and strawberry and cotton candy. These are put out to engage the middle school age child and the early adolescent. And it seems innocent, but as I mentioned to you, they all have nicotine, and many of them actually have THC in it. The vaping ends up producing aerosols. They contain heavy metals. They're volatile. They have organic particles, and they attack the lung. The whole idea is that behind vaping, these liquids are heated to degrees upwards to 400 degrees, and it vaporizes the solutions. And when they get into the lungs and cool off, that's when the difficulty occurs. What happens is that some of these solutions become oils again, or they become gels. And the lung issues that have been reported are chronic bronchitis, pneumonitis, which is inflammation of the lung tissue itself. There are infections, we have irritants, inhalants, and there becomes solidification of the oils and gases. Now, what makes it so difficult for us to diagnose is that when foreign bodies get into the lung, our body's macrophages, which are blood cells, they come into the lung to try to eat up or try to get rid of these foreign substances, and then that's what causes the actual injury to the lungs. Smoking, nicotine, marijuana, all drugs inhibit normal brain development. In the normal person, the brain continues to develop up to age 25. So you can imagine if you have 10, 12, 14-year-olds starting to get into these habits, that they are impacting themselves. It impacts learning, memory, and attention. We found that there is also an increased risk of addiction, especially to nicotine and certainly other drugs. Some of the uses that we find is that nicotine, as I mentioned earlier, is the most commonly used, and it's contained in other quote-unquote non-nicotine solutions. Marijuana is being used in these vaping contraptions. Crack cocaine, powdered cocaine is actually placed into these vaping machines, and then when it is combusted, it becomes crack cocaine in the matter of seconds. Heroin is being used in the 70s and certainly in the 60s. Heroin was very impure, and the only way to really get any effect from it was using it intravenously. The heroin today is so pure that people actually snort it and they can smoke it. And that stumbling block of having to inject is no longer a barrier. We also see and hear on television that it's being touted as the great tool to use for smoking cessation. This is actually a false claim, because although individuals that vape may stop smoking cigarettes, they're still addicted to nicotine. In fact, I have had a patient who was a 24-year-old smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, who switched over to vaping and has gone from using one cartridge, which is equivalent to one pack of cigarettes, 25 cigarettes, one cartridge, to using 1.5 to 2 cartridges a day. So they're not smoking cigarettes, but they're smoking more nicotine than they were before they stopped. Now, I know that there are some reports and some unclinical representations that people that go to vaping to quit nicotine are successful, but that's unfounded. And I know many actual cases where just the opposite is true, that they become more dependent on nicotine. There's a claim that they're safer than cigarettes. Well, it's true that vaping does have less tar, but it has more volatile organic particles and chemicals. And as you are seeing, people who have only been vaping for a short period of time have a lot of difficulties with their lungs. We all have been keeping up with the number of individuals who have died recently, and the 600 or plus that have found their ways to emergency rooms, ICUs, and it takes about 10 to 2 weeks for them to recover. So in the one sense where they say that it's safer than cigarettes in the long term, I can't see it. And they're certainly not safer than cigarettes in the short term. What can parents do? I think that parents need to start a conversation about vaping and e-cigarettes, just like we have done with using alcohol and other drugs. We need to ask them what they know about it. Start off asking them what they know, and then ask them what they think about it so they can lay out what their beliefs are. Then we need to explain our concerns about vaping and e-cigarettes and get across the message that they are not safe. We need to wait for an opportunity to start this conversation, perhaps after we see a television commercial about Juul and Blue and all those other things, or after we see someone in public vaping. I can't tell you how many times I'm driving down the highway and I see a big cloud of smoke come out of somebody's car. And we need to be sure that we answer questions honestly. You know, when our children ask us stuff and if we're not forthcoming, that turns them off and they don't want to hear anything else that we say. We have to answer their questions honestly. And if you smoke cigarettes, you might as well get ready to stop because, you know, it's not do as I say, they do as they see. And we have to try to set a good example. Now, let's talk about a little bit about what to look for. Got to look for UBS and flash drives. These companies that make these things are purposely trying to hide it from parental view. They don't want us to know what we're looking at. So you'll see all kinds of strange looking devices. Some of them look like pens. Some of them look like cell phones. Some of them look like long, short pens. They're very much disguised. But you need to look for these little pods. They're called Juul pods or cartridges. The children talk about, they don't say vaping, they say juuling. We need to look out for new friends. Now, interestingly, these new friends look sort of nerdy. And they're overly polite, and they come in and they seem like, oh, these are nice new kids. And you need to look for isolation of your young person from old friends, and they're no longer interested in the activities that they used to be. There seems to be a drop in performance in school. There's a decline in cleanliness and in appearance. In some cases, you'll find unusual online purchases. They come in the mail, they come disguised as all kinds of interesting looking, innocent looking packages and purchases. But most of these products are sold online. Unfortunately, when we start to expand our discussion a bit and talk about CBD, you can find that anywhere. can go into a gas station, head shops, anywhere. You'll see CBD products. And when you see that, these vaping machines and e-cigarettes are also sold there. They may have increased thirst because after they vape, they dry out, or they may start having nosebleeds when they didn't have it previously, because a lot of times they will exhale the cloud through their nostrils. You may start to smell some faint, sweet scents in the home. And you'll notice that there may be a decreased use of caffeine products, those jolts, the 5 energy drinks or coffee. And that's because that now they're turning their reward system on with this vaping, where they used to use caffeine drinks or boost or 5-hour energy to get some sort of a jolt. They've replaced that now. So they're not using those things anymore. And if you notice that they're visiting head shops or tobacco shops, that's another red flag. What do we do? How do we get help? Well, there are a number of options. One is always to speak to the person first. Give them an opportunity to understand that you're concerned, and they can get their first encounter with you. You can speak with a primary care provider. You can have their favorite teacher or their coach talk with them. School counselor. Many school systems now are starting to run programs, and they have awareness. And I think that that's another option that is available. You can always talk to an addiction medicine specialist, a therapist, a counselor, or a physician. Clergy or other trusted mentors can also be of help. Now, we could talk a lot more and go on and on, but as I understand it, our issue is to field some questions from you all. And so I think that we're going to turn it over to take those on at this time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baxter, for your information. I saw a lot of the heads moving. I've just muted your line, Link Rhonda. I saw a lot of heads moving. I've seen some questions already start to come in. This is how we're going to do this. I am going to read a number of questions that I've already received. If you have a question, I'd like for you to please go ahead and start typing in your questions. It's going to be really important that we get those questions in and get those questions fielded, because what we want to do is get as many as we can. We want to be sure that we're able to hear from you. So I'm going to ask you to type in your questions. We will not unmute the line so that we can keep the feedback down, if that's okay for everyone. I'm actually starting to get some folks that are texting questions. So this is very, very helpful that we're getting information in. So now, Link Ron, I'm going to unmute you now, and I'm going to start with the first question. The first question that I have is an email question, and that is many of us were interested in. Link Ron, let's just do a quick mic check. Can you do a quick test so we can hear you?
Yes. Microphone check 1, 2.
All right, here we go. That's the way we get our questions started. The first question is this: does vaping really affect, quote unquote, our children? I thought vaping was something that only white children participated in. Are Black children now vaping as well? And if they are, is it as the same rate as adults? And is it at the same debilitating manner as other children and other adults? Dr. Baxter?
Yes, well, actually, that's a very interesting question, and it's a very poignant one also, because if it was just our children, it wouldn't be an epidemic. It is mostly the non-African American children that are doing it, but make no mistake, it is having an impact in our community as well.
Very helpful, very helpful. And one of the things that I failed to announce in the beginning, this was a collaborative partnership, not only with HHS, but two of our other facets. Our Services to Youth facet, which is chaired by Link Crystal Davis, as well as our National Trends and Services, Link Tanya Longino. And I am going to ask a question on behalf of both of them. Dr. Baxter, and he's familiar with the links, but just for those that are calling in that may or may not be familiar with the way that we operate, under our national trends, this is where we do a lot of our advocacy work. And so we have a kind of a two-part question, but I'm going to really start with the legislative side. And the question from NTS, which is National Trend and Service, Link Tanya, is this: is there any piece of legislation that we as citizens and members of the link should consider as we are fighting this challenge across the country with our young people with e-cigarettes?
Well, there are some individual efforts being made by some municipalities. There are some states that are trying to put together some legislation about banning the children flavors, you know, the candies and things like that. But I think that from a real political standpoint, what needs to be demanded is that these things all go under FDA approval. The FDA has approval processes for drugs. They have approval processes for devices. They have approval processes for botanicals. So if we can mount a political effort to demand that this whole issue come under FDA approval, I think that would be the most effective place to start.
Very helpful. You heard it here, FDA approval. So for all of our advocates that are on the line, please take those notes. This is very important. This is from Link Crystal, our chair of Services to Youth. Dr. Baxter, how are so many young people, children, able to obtain these vaping devices if they're not of age?
Well, it's the same old story with how they get cigarettes and how they get alcohol. They either get fake IDs or they get some older friend, and sadly, they get some of their parents who will actually, obtain these things for them.
Sounds like the same old song that has continued to be in play. So thank you so much. We have some questions now on the line. I'm going to hit the chat line. Let's see. Does the e-cigarette product contain THC, a psychoactive chemical found in marijuana? Could this be a string of vaping-related deaths and illnesses across the United States and across our community?
Well, the answer is yes. And the problem, once again, and this goes back to what we were just talking about, is that there is no control or monitoring over the vaping apparatus itself. There is no FDA monitoring or standards for these solutions. The solutions are being made by quote unquote reputable labs, but also the black market has gotten involved. And so the black market will actually put THC into some of these solutions. They all, and when I say all, that's that 90%, will contain nicotine because they're trying to get our children hooked at least on tobacco. And some of these black market products are contaminated with other things that we have no idea what is in them. And so when our children vape these things and it gets into their lungs, it's very difficult to tell what is causing the problem.
Great. There are great questions coming in. I have another question. This is a really helpful one here. Can you speak to the effect on our children who already have compromised systems or health issues like asthma?
Well, certainly anyone that has any pulmonary condition should avoid any sort of irritant. And, just regular smoking is a negative thing. Certainly vaping when you're having great big volumes of heated substances coming into the lungs, that's going to cause more difficulty for those with asthma. Anyone that has asthma or any pulmonary condition are going to be at greater risk to have difficulties and find themselves in the emergency room or in the ICU, without a doubt.
Very helpful. And I think we started talking about this a little bit earlier in terms of product marketing. There's a specific question to the marketing is not only how is the product being marketed, but is the African American community being targeted in marketing for this product?
I haven't seen so. I haven't seen it. It may be, but I have not seen that. I haven't seen any marketing that is specifically targeting our children.
Very helpful. I see Nikki Venable. I see you. I see these great questions. I'm going to ask this question, Dr. Baxter. Are doctors giving enough warning to vulnerable populations such as pregnant women? And what do we know about drug interactions?
Well, these are excellent questions, and the answer is no, that physicians are not, other than telling pregnant women that they shouldn't smoke and that they shouldn't use alcohol. I mean, we all know that, but I don't think that there's been enough time for us to gather enough information to talk specifically about vaping and e-cigarette smoking.
Mm-hmm. I see some of our advocates were really hearing you, Dr. Baxter, when you talked about the FDA regulations. So the question is, how can we, as a community, force the FDA to regulate the vaping devices like Juul?
Well, it's going to be very difficult for a number of reasons. And, before I started talking, I should have all warned you that I'm a straight talker. So when you ask me answers, I'm going to give you the truth. And I'm not afraid to get into difficulty for telling the truth. But there are a lot of competing factors that influence the FDA. And it's unfortunate that that's a fact, but it is. These companies that are involved with pharmaceuticals and with some of the other aligned industries are big lobbyists. And so some of that is part of the difficulty in getting things looked at and evaluated and monitored the way that it should. But what we've seen from history is that when we get enough people making comments and asking questions, that we can sometimes push things in the direction that they should normally go.
And let me just acknowledge this, Dr. Baxter. You need to know that that question actually came from one of our Jack and Jill teens out of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I want you to know that young people are actually asking these questions. Young people, you rock. You are so amazing. I love to hear that fight in you. So that is great. I have another question that just came in. Where can we secure pamphlets or written literature that can be handed out to our communities at public events and programs, or we hold some of our activities, not only within the links, but also within our organization?
Well, I was researching that recently, and you can get the specific information about vaping and e-cigarettes from the SAMHSA website, and it's samhsa.gov / vaping and e-cigarettes.
Very helpful. And just a note from our national trends leaders on our advocacy issues, and that is for those that are not members of Links Incorporated. Everyone should be contacting their members of Congress and their U.S. senators. So we want to just give you that note. That is coming from our leadership. We also have a note from Project Lead that's here confirming what Dr. Baxter is saying, and that vaping lobby is targeting many Black lawmakers and offering large donations to struggling HBCUs. So there'll be more information from Project Lead. So thank you so much for sharing those updates as well. One of the things that I do want to ask Dr. Baxter, this is a question that came in earlier, and it goes a little bit like this, and it's really interesting. Why does vaping appear to cause more lung damage than ordinary cigarette smoke?
Well, that's not really, really hard
Okay.
question to answer, because what happens is that if you're smoking cigarettes, you can normally just take in as much smoke as you would do with a regular inhalation. However, with vaping and e-cigarettes, it boils the solution up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and people take in a deeper draw, and so you're getting higher concentration of whatever the solution is, whether it's nicotine, whether it's THC, whether it's cocaine, and that has a greater impact on the lungs because you have more volume and you have a bigger dose coming in. And that's why that people that actually start vaping become addicted to substances, because they are developing tolerance, because they're taking in a big dose. And then when they do, and this is basic for all addictions, people use substances to feel something. So if you're taking in big dosages, you're going to feel something, but your body's going to develop tolerance. And so you're going to have to do more and take in bigger doses to get that same original feeling. And that's what gets the whole cycle of addiction going on and perpetuates itself. Unfortunately, with this vaping, it causes not instantaneous, but pretty quickly, it will have an impact on the functioning of the lungs.
Very helpful. Dr. Baxter, here's another question. I'm excited to ask you this one because this is one we saw earlier. E-cigarettes have been around for a long time. Why is there such an increase in lung-related disorders now? Is this fake news or is this a real thing?
No, this is a real thing. And remember when we first got started, I told you all that they had a version of e-cigarettes back in '07, because I actually tried one for cigars, and it was okay, but it wasn't, good enough to make me want to start, using that on a regular basis. But the technology has become so good, and the technology with the vaping has become so much better that it will rival and surpass the use of regular cigarettes. So it's just better technology now.
Very helpful. Another question just came in from Virginia. Is secondhand smoke just as harmful as regular cigarette secondhand smoke?
I think probably not, and basically because that smoke that comes from cigarettes actually lingers in the air, and the vapor that comes from the e-cigarettes is not the same typical smoke. It's vapor, so it doesn't hang in the air. It actually diffuses very, very quickly, so it's less likely to be inhaled by someone in the near proximity, as much as cigarette smoke.
Cigarette smoke, okay. Very helpful. Good question just came up here. What methods or treatments are available then to those who are addicted? What other methods do we have?
Well, the first thing that has to happen is that a diagnosis of substance use disorder or addiction has to be made. And what we need to understand is that addiction is a disease that actually is familial and it is inherited.
Right.
Everybody that takes opioid medications do not become addicted. It's less than 10%. Likewise, everybody that uses alcohol does not become an alcoholic. Everybody that smokes pot does not become addicted to a cannabis. But some people are physiologically and genetically predisposed. So we actually have to first make an accurate diagnosis to see if they actually have the disease. Then if they do, they have to undergo what we call a full treatment experience, which is basically a stop use of this substance, which we call detoxification. Now it's called withdrawal management. The second thing that has to happen is that a person has to have rehabilitation, which is counseling, learning about the disease of addiction, learning about their triggers, and learning how to manage their feelings, loneliness, anger, whatever it is. And lastly, they have to maintain and continue to practice what they have been taught. This is a basic three-pronged process that in medicine, we apply this to all other chronic medical illnesses. The thing that I like to use is diabetes. When you look at how we treat diabetics, they come into the emergency room, the blood sugar is out of control. First thing we do is we detoxify them. We run a line in, drip insulin in, and when their blood sugars come down to normal, we don't say, see you later, be sugar-free. What we do is we educate them, we rehabilitate them, we teach them about the diet, exercise, whatever, and then we don't say, see you later, have a good life. We follow them for a period of time and have them keep practicing. So when you treat addiction the same way you treat any other chronic medical illness, the outcomes are tremendous, and people do get well.
And that really speaks to the stigma, Dr. Baxter, that's associated with addiction. And so we are excited about hearing this. I think I have 2 more questions coming in, and then we will transition to our closing remarks. Has there been any research as to why children or kids specifically are using these e-cigarettes, social, self-medication, or for mental health? And then are people of color more predisposed to addiction than their white counterparts?
I think that this has come upon us so quickly that we really don't have real good studies. We certainly don't have any peer-reviewed studies at this time to make sound assessments about this. But what I would say is that it's a peer pressure thing. It has to do with the young people, being able to do things that adults don't know about. They can do it right in front of you, and if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't even detect it. So it's that whole thing about adolescents being adolescents. I'm not sure if we have any other ways of describing what's going on without having some real studies. And I don't believe that it's a major thing with African Americans, but certainly there are enough of us attending some of these white schools and in the suburban school culture that I know that we do have some of our own that are experimenting with it.
And this is a good parent question here, Dr. Baxter, before we begin to close. The question is, can you speak about the black market of e-cigarettes and devices that are cheaper and have different names and different packaging and use different marketing strategies? This parent has heard of parents overlooking the signs of e-cigarettes because they're just looking for Juul. So they just want to understand, are these names like vaporizers and other terms have been used in the black market? Can you speak to that for the parents that are on the line?
Yes, and they keep changing all the time, which makes it very difficult for us to keep up with it. But here's the basic thing that I've found when we look at things like this. When you have the black market involved, they're not interested in purity. They are interested in getting individuals hooked on things so that they will continue to use it. And when they are selling to companies or head shops or smoking outlets, those folks are looking for cheap. And so if they can buy a product from one source cheaper than the other, that's what they will do. And those black market folks, they're looking to somehow make their product more attractive, and that's why that they will put more nicotine in their solutions. That's why that they will put THC in their solutions. And it's all about money, unfortunately. And whenever there's a question and the answer doesn't make sense, it's because it's about dollars.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Baxter, we want to give you a chance to make some closing remarks. And in your remarks, if you don't mind naming some of those websites that you named earlier and any other places where more information is available. So we'll give you a chance to close out. Your final remarks, Dr. Baxter?
Well, I would once again applaud you all for making this opportunity available. It's very encouraging that the Eastern area links is, on the pulse of what's important to our community and to our children. So I'm very grateful to have had this opportunity, and I applaud you for being out there on the forefront. There's a lot that we have to learn about vaping and e-cigarettes, and unfortunately, we don't have the studies, because they haven't been done at this point, to give us an actual idea about how vast this is. We can see that it's fast moving. And we really don't have all of the answers in terms of what's causing some of these lung conditions and deaths that have occurred. But I think that is very important, as you all have initiated, that we get not local endeavors, but that we get a big federal push going in terms of getting these things regulated, not only the solutions, but the devices. And lastly, I would tell you that I can't tell you sources other than what SAMHSA has available, because we don't have all of those studies available. But certainly, if you go online and type in e-cigarettes and vaping, and you'll be able to find a lot of sources. I would certainly tell you to avoid looking at Facebook articles, because they're not reputable, but certainly any article or publication that you get from the government will probably be more helpful and more reliable.
Great. Dr. Baxter, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining. I'm going to turn this call back over. We had over 202 participants hit the line tonight, so we have been able to engage all of you. Thank you so much for logging in and zooming in. I'll turn it over to Rhonda.
Perfect. Thank you very much. What I will say is that Dr. Baxter has been kind. What he did not share is that I called less than 2 weeks ago, and I called and I called and I called, and I just flooded him with all kinds of questions, but he had all kinds of answers. And I thank you personally for taking my call and for continuing to be patient with us as we navigate through this health crisis that is impacting our children. So Mother Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you can do better. This evening, you have debunked all of the many misconceptions, all of the misunderstandings and the myths surrounding vaping and its impact on our children and subsequently on our family units. You've raised our awareness, and you've provided us with a solid call of action that's anchored in facts and truth. And we know, as members of the Links, that we are not passive. We're not peripheral participants when it comes to matters impacting our youth. If you want to see some movement out of women, Black women, then come for our children. Okay, so as an organization, we will continue to work to protect the health of our youth, to inform advocacy, and to raise awareness in our communities to increase our capacity to resist conditions that facilitate drug use and abuse, especially within our children. So thank you for adding your voice to our charge in the Eastern area. We're also fully committed to the economic empowerment and advancement of minority-owned businesses and enterprises. And so it's with sincere appreciation that I present you with this token of distinctive style from premier designer Cedric Brown of Atlanta, Georgia. So thank you, Dr. Baxter, for being our green table guest. You are actually our first green table guest. So you're gonna look really good sitting next to your next table. Okay?
All right, thank you so much.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And to our audience participants, we extend a special thank you to each one of you for joining us this evening. Stay tuned for announcement of our next Green Table Talk, and we'll be sure to save you a seat at our table. Thank you and good evening.
That ends our talk. Good night, everyone.